I was telling some of you, we actually had the opportunity to sort of do this a couple months ago in Nantucket.
Right.
It was just, I think, a great conversation, and everyone who came up to me was fascinated because they really didn't understand Consumer Reports. You know, they think about cars, they think about home appliances, but they really don't understand why the organization existed and where you're moving to. So for those of you, the people here who really aren't familiar with Consumer Reports, talk a little about, currently the state of the business.
Well, a lot of folks, first, great to be here once again having this conversation. I think a lot of folks think we're a privately held magazine company, publishing company. And we've always been a nonprofit that has been an organization that uses a variety of different tools to shape the marketplace and to grow consumer power. And in order to do that, we have to investigate products and services. We have to look at the rules and standards and the guidelines that create fairness in a marketplace. And we also have to work on the policies and the government guidelines to encourage the kind of innovation that is transparent, accountable, and puts consumers first. And that's really been our mission. And because the marketplace has changed so dramatically, so many of the things we have to do and the capabilities that we need have changed as well.
So a lot of the things we've talked about over the past couple days, when you talk about marketplace, it's not only the physical. We start
Right.
to think about, as everything moves digital, how consumers are protected, how they're thought about. So how is that evolution from physical goods to digital and the internet? How do you see, again, your role around consumer advocacy, especially in times of, a lot of the demise of, Twitter, we've talked about Facebook. I noticed a lot of times we've been using the word guardrails
Right.
over the past couple of days, ethics, responsibility. Again, where do you fit in that equation?
Well, we've always been about trust. How do you create a trustworthy marketplace? And how do you create trustworthy products and services? You need transparency and accountability. And at the moment, we have neither one of those things. We have a really proud history of being around for 86 years and creating an enormous amount of consumer rights and protections. And I think what a lot of folks don't recognize is that a lot of those rights and protections do not migrate into the digital space. So in order for us to evaluate the privacy, security, the control of your data, the transparency of a product, we had to build technological capabilities. And so we have technologists, we have innovators, we are looking at apps. I could give you all kinds of examples. Let me just give you a quick one. So there's nobody out there evaluating apps for security, trustworthy security and data leakage. And there are a lot of really great apps that you think, I'm going to get this because it's going to empower me in the marketplace. So the latest one we looked at was one that is terrific. It's called GoodRx. And because so many of our health plans don't cover our prescription drugs, you go on this app and it tells you, here's the cheapest place you can get this. What we found out by looking at the algorithm is that they're also collecting your prescription drug information. And not only that, but the metadata that connects that prescription drug information to you as an individual and then selling it to third and fourth parties. So once we brought this to them, they actually did the right thing. Not everybody does, but they said, you know what? We're firing the VP, we're hiring a chief privacy officer, and we're going to change the algorithm.
And was this a monetization, right? Like,
Yes.
you think about how do we
Yes.
use this data to monetize it? So they were doing that on the back end, not being transparent with the consumer, but the consumer was getting it for free, right? We talked about this whole idea of free, right? Consumers
Yes.
love free, and went back and forth on this, that we're all expectation is things are free, and we really don't understand that there is a quid pro quo, right? We're giving up something to get that for free. We thought it only happens in advertising, but it sounds like it's happening across, pretty much all of these apps as well.
Well, the business model is, we have a monopoly system of 4 major platforms. We don't have standards. We haven't had as a society, a conversation about what ethical business standards are for the digital marketplace. So people think, well, wait a minute, we have HIPAA standards. It's against the law for you to be trading my medical information. Well, HIPAA doesn't apply to this app, and it's same for credit score apps. I think many of us have these favorite apps on our phone and don't recognize, the vulnerability and the fact that as we have slipped into the world of connected products, consumer power has slipped off to the sideline, and there are other threats on the horizon.
And when we talk about algorithms, a lot of, it was funny, I was talking to someone earlier who said after the Lucid session, they started getting retargeted with Lucid ads, right? So we even think everyone always has that experience, right, where they swear the microphone's listening and they start getting retargeted, and it's very possible that it is happening. How do you, is this a government issue? So obviously, how do you influence government to start to step in and say, hey, these things are happening, you need to pay attention?
That's precisely what we spend a lot of time doing, but sometimes you can't wait for a government mandate. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. On the privacy front, we're not seeing or expecting any federal legislation that is going to do that. And now what's happening is a patchwork. You've got California, you've got Maine, you've got a variety. We can use those opportunities to create momentum, and that's what we have to do, and it's something we've done in the past. But then when you think about cybersecurity, now, so glad Jeffrey Katzenberg brought it up. I do think that's one of the biggest threats, and that's something we have to really focus on, and that's one of the next horizons, I think, that we're doing a lot of investing on is how do we bring more awareness to users that don't have a sense of the threat.
I think he said it's like a seatbelt in a car. Everyone should have it, right? So everyone should have.
And we had to fight for that seatbelt, by the way, and we'll have to fight for privacy as well.
Yeah.
And yes.
But and you guys are building tools for consumers to be able to evaluate, sort of again, their own digital identity and sort of cybersecurity.
Yes. So there's one thing you all do before you leave the conference is go to Security Planner at Consumer Reports. It's free. It's a tool that helps you walk through every one of your devices and starts shutting out the lights on data collection and starts to give you a little bit more security and a little bit more control over all the ways in which you interact online. Unfortunately, we just did a lot of surveying in the public, and folks are not as diligent about strong passwords, about multi-factor authentication, and that is what is putting us at great risk on the cybersecurity front. The consumer-facing tools are too complicated. Folks are just not adopting them.
Right. So the other thing we've talked a lot about for over the last day and a half is climate change and sustainability. The SEC has come down really to try to combat greenwashing, but really with the investor in mind, right? Greenwashing, misleads investors potentially and puts them at risk. So the SEC is stepping in. But as consumers think about making decisions to be more sustainable, Consumer Reports is thinking about how do you look out for them. So you have a bunch of different rankings around green, and how are you doing that? How is that evolution? How is that journey?
Well, consumers are telling us that's what they want, right? So we have this generation of consumers are incredibly focused on sustainability, and so what kinds of tools can we provide to consumers so they make green choices? And so we rolled that out on cars. We have green choices on cars. There's a lot of data that we have and that's out there that the EPA has, and we were able to use that data to really begin to create standards around what a consumer can make a decision about. Same thing on appliances. We're now, and we're looking at the whole life cycle of the appliance, how it's built, the reliability, as well as how it's going to be disposed of. So the reliability, how much of a shelf life does it have? Do you want something that's going to break and end up in a junk heap right away, or do we want to shape the market to be more sustainable in the entire life cycle of the product? That's how we're thinking about it, and that's how we're looking at that.
But cost comes in there as well. I know we talked about EVs, especially some of the ones we've heard about and seen over the past couple of days, still are at a premium.
Very
right?
high.
So how do we make is there a green premium? And are consumers willing to spend the extra money to do that, or does the price have to come in line with the other choices they have?
The price does have to drop. You are going to see an explosion on the EV market, and what we've developed is a tool, a consumer-facing tool, that really helps you walk through the decision you have to make to land on the right EV, and to understand what kind of tax credits that you have, how to make decisions not just about the car, but the car insurance. This is another example you and I have talked about in the past. You think when you go online and you get your car insurance, the premium is based on your driving record, whether you've got speeding tickets. Unfortunately, the algorithm also looks at your income, and it looks at the neighborhood, your zip code. So if you live in a black neighborhood as opposed to a white neighborhood that's adjacent, the black premium is going to be higher than the white premium. That is the kind of algorithmic bias that is seeping into a world that we thought was going to be free of bias. It's not the case. And again, not transparent, and that does not breed accountability.
And I'm going to take questions in a minute if there's a couple mic handlers here. So some of you heard in the breakfast this morning a little about your book. So the book came out 2 months ago or so. Talk a little about, sort of why write a book and sort of what, people could expect. I think the book is available here, but what they could expect from the book.
Well, two things. I wrote the book because I'm absolutely convinced that we cannot have a strong democracy unless we have a fair and just marketplace. That those two things are inextricably linked. And I think consumer rights and consumer power is a lever, I think, that we have in the marketplace that we have to use and demand change. And it's also a way of creating awareness about what tools you do have at your disposal. So while the issue of non-transparency and accountability is daunting, and we don't have the government rules and regulations, I do try to end every chapter with really practical advice, because you have to make decisions in the marketplace about loans, about cars, about your home and security. So we try to give you some really practical advice, but we also try to let's not forget the bigger picture here around what these algorithms are doing to the marketplace, what the monetization of your personal data is doing as well to your choices, and how the monopoly environment we're in is actually limiting the choices that you're seeing when you do go to that digital marketplace.
We have time for, is there any questions? We have a question back here.
Thank you so much. So
you identify yourself?
My name is Ali from Planner. The question is about data ownership. So you talked about consumers generating data and enriching algorithms. What are your thoughts on compensating the people who generate the content, and then on top of that, later taxing them? And do you foresee that maybe without government regulations, we will see a marketplace in which content creators would be compensated?
There's a lot of talk about that. We have taken the position that we do not think that is the right path for controlling your data. We believe that you will see stratification in that data that I think will not create equity. I will tell you that I hope you all check out next week. We're going to have a new beta that's called Permission Slip about how to increase control and security of your data. It's about experimenting with a product, a tool that is going to allow you to have an authorized agent make decisions for you about your data and control of your data. And we're also looking at this notion of a data trust. So we're leaning in that direction, but do check it out. It's called Permission Slip, and it's an experimental product that we want to hear from you about.
The thing I want to leave on is it was a conversation we had about misinformation on Facebook and advertising. I think it was.
Oh, right, yes.
Because there are vulnerable communities, and we talked a little about specifically an aging population and how they're using and being targeted on social media. Why don't you just, as a leaving note, because I think it really shows, the power of misinformation as it pertains to, certain populations.
Absolutely. So Facebook, during COVID, there was and it continues, a plethora of misinformation. We put together a series of ads and information to be posted. We went through all the censorship gating, and it passed every gating. We made up a fictitious organization. It was so apparent to us, and it's sort of like whack-a-mole. Before it actually posted, we told them, hey, it's us, busted, and that just gives you a smattering of what's there. I do want to close on the notion of consumer power, and there is strength in it. We do have to wait for a lot of regulators and agencies that are dragging their feet, and we've got to demand a marketplace that is fair and just, but there is power in the collective. And I'll leave you with the one example about cars and say that cars have never been safer. We had to fight for the backup camera, fight for seatbelts. But when we started seeing that all this great life-saving technology, forward collision warning, pedestrian warning, are still luxury items that you have to pay for. Life-saving technology is stratified in terms of your pay. We told the car manufacturers, if you want to even contemplate being considered for our top 10 picks every year, you need to make this standard. In 2 years' time, it went from 34% to 74%. That's real change, and it only happens when you have a community of consumers that are pooling their resources to create the kind of power that we can come to the table with. I think there's more to do, and we can only do it as a collective. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share how we're changing what we have to do to shape the market to grow consumer power at a time when we desperately need it.
Great. Well, thank you, Marta.
Thank you, Josh.